So in today's lesson, we're going to continue to work on how we would expand and simplify with some polynomials. Specifically today, I want to focus on if we have a binomial multiplied by a binomial. Remember, binomial means that we have two terms being multiplied by two terms. This is something that you would have seen last year as well. May have seen some of these words being used with this idea. We still call this the distributive property. In a second, you'll see we're going to take terms in the first bracket and distribute them to terms in the second bracket. This also sometimes is called the rainbow rule, or also referred to as FOIL, which stands for first, outer, inner, last. So as we do this, our distributive property, or again where it gets its name, rainbow rule, is saying that we will take the first term here, and I like to, like we did in our last example, just circle all those terms and make sure you keep the sign with the appropriate term. So if I circle all the terms, there are 4 terms, 2 in each bracket, and we start with the first term in the first bracket, and we will multiply that with both of the terms in the second bracket, and there's our rainbow. And then we will take the second term in the first bracket and we will multiply that by both of the terms in the second bracket. In other words, we are distributing or multiplying both terms in the first bracket with both terms in the second bracket. Now, using some of the skills that we reviewed in our last lesson, if I take x and I multiply it by x, we will get x squared. If I take x and I multiply it by positive 5, remember that the coefficient, or the number in front of the x, is a 1. So really what we're doing is saying 1 times positive 5 is positive 5x, or plus 5x. We then do the same thing with the positive 3. Positive 3 multiplied by x. Again, that coefficient is 1, so positive 3 times 1 is positive 3x. And then lastly, positive 3 times positive 5 will give us positive 15. There is our expand piece. Now, like what we did in our last lesson, we will also then simplify, which really means that we are going to collect our like terms. Typically, when we do this, we will have a pair of like terms that are in the middle of the polynomial. So I have this plus 5x and plus 3x. So I leave the x squared alone. Combining our x's together, we're going to add these two terms together, paying attention to those signs. So we end up with positive 8x. And then lastly, we have this plus 15. There's our basic idea. So I'm going to work through a few more examples to show you just a couple other things, but this is what we're going to basically be doing for all of these examples here. So in the second one, I will do the exact same thing. I like to again start by, I'm just going to circle all 4 of these terms, including the sign with the appropriate term, so the negative 6 and the positive 2. We can then draw these rainbows if we want, x times both terms in the second bracket, and then the negative 6 times both terms in the second bracket. If we carry out that multiplication, x times x gives us x squared. X times positive 2 is positive 2x. Negative 6 times x gives us negative 6x. So here we need to be careful with this sign as we start multiplying by negative 6. And then negative 6 times positive 2, a negative multiplied by a positive, would give us negative 12. Collecting our like terms, again, we have a positive 2x and we have a minus 6x. So we have to be careful with our integer work here. We have x squared. 2 minus 6 will give us minus 4x, and then negative 12 gets carried along on the end. In the third example, really again, all I'm focusing on here is as I change some of the signs here in the binomials, what does that look like, just to make sure we're okay. Again, I'm going to circle all of these, x and negative 3. I have x and negative 7. There's my 4 terms. I'm going to take the x and distribute it to both terms here. I'm going to take the negative 3 and distribute it to both terms here. And if we do that, then I would have x times x gives us x squared. X times negative 7 is negative 7x. Negative 3 times x, so negative 3x. And then negative 3 times negative 7. Remember that when we multiply two negatives, we will end up with a positive, so positive 21. In any of these cases, if you are having trouble with the arithmetic, don't forget you are allowed to use a calculator to help you out with that. Simplifying then, we are going to collect our like terms here. So if I collect those two like terms, we end up here then with x squared negative 7 minus 3. Remember that when we are collecting like terms, think of this as a number line. Where would we be on the number line if we did this? Okay, on our number line, if here is 0 and we go to negative 7, okay, remember that negative 3 means to move 3 more in this direction here, so we would end up at negative 10. And again, if that seems confusing, don't forget that you are allowed to use your calculator. In the next two examples, what I want to expand this to is this idea of what happens then if I have a binomial that is being squared. And as a reminder here on the side, I want to say, well, don't forget to square something, to have 4 squared, really means that we're going to take 4 and we are going to multiply it by itself. So to square something means to multiply by itself. So that's the same thing that we're going to do here. To square a binomial really means to take that binomial and to multiply it by itself. So we just write it out 2 times, the same way I could write the 4 out 2 times if I have 4 squared. Once we do that additional step, this becomes no different than our first 3 examples. So I'll circle the x and the positive 4 and the x and the positive 4. Again, if it helps, you can put the rainbows in. If it doesn't help or you don't need that, then don't bother. If I multiply this out, then we end up with x squared plus 4x plus 4x plus 16. And then collecting our like terms or simplifying, we have our 2 like terms in the middle, so that we get x squared plus 8x and plus 16. Same idea works even if we have a negative in the middle, so just to make sure everybody is okay, we would write this out then 2 times x minus 3 times x minus 3. That's what our square does. We could then circle again, if we need to, all of these terms, the x, the minus 3, and then the x, and then the minus 3. Our distribution would mean x gets multiplied by both of the terms in the second bracket. The negative 3 also gets multiplied by both of the terms in the second bracket. We carry out that multiplication, x times x squared, x times negative 3 gives us a negative 3x. I switch to the negative 3 in the first bracket. We multiply that with the x, and I take that and multiply it with negative 3. And again, being careful with our integers, 2 negatives will give us a positive. Collecting our like terms here, then I have a negative 3x and a negative 3x. So again, we need to be careful. This will result in negative 6x plus 9. There's our new skill, multiplying binomials, which does expand into this idea of when we square a binomial, but ultimately this ends up being the exact same process with just one extra step. At the very end, I want to put in one quick reminder from last note, and there will be a few practice questions like this in your homework today as well. This is going to lead nicely our next and last step with expanding and simplifying in our next assignment and note will be to put some of these skills all together. So just a reminder that we can also use this expanding idea. If I have a single term like a 5 in front of this bracket, we also expand here as well. Okay, again, we can call that distributive property or rainbow rule as well. Okay, it's the same rule that we're using in both cases, just here we're multiplying with binomials. Here I'm multiplying with a single term called a monomial into a trinomial. And if I do that, I would end up with 5x squared. 5 times 6 would give us 30, and the x just gets carried along. And 5 times negative 3 would give us negative 15. So I'm going to give you a few practice questions with that as well. And then in our last note on algebra, after this one, we'll be putting some of these skills all together, and we'll see why we do that. Have a good day, guys.